So a few weeks ago, I was doing some research on alter egos, and I came across this phenomenon called the Batman effect. Turns out there's a research paper on it. We both read it. It's very fascinating, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, when you had told me about this, I was very not interested. I had read a couple media articles. I'd heard of this before, the Batman effect, and everything I had read was just to me kind of dumb and shallow. Like pretend to be Batman and it makes you like super confident. I'm like, okay, fine. But like many things, reading the actual paper is really fascinating. And what they found out and the way they found it out, I was pretty blown away with. So it's 100% worth talking about. So yeah, let's just start by going through what they actually did, try and just give people an idea of what this paper is communicating, and then we can get into some of the, how would we apply this to ourselves and that sort of stuff. So the paper is called "What Would Batman Do? Self-Distancing Improves Executive Function in Young Children." So what they did was they took a bunch of children. They had a bunch of 3-year-olds and a bunch of 5-year-olds, so pretty little kids. And they kind of separated them by age. They had the 3-year-olds over here, they had the 5-year-olds over here. And they put them through these tests. I forget the name of this specific test, but it's essentially this card game type of thing where you have this test administrator sitting across from the child at this table, and you lay out cards and you ask them to do certain things. So it might be sort the cards, or you put all the blue cards in this pile, put all the red cards in that pile, or if the fish is pointing to the left, then put it in this pile, and if it's pointing to the right, put it in that pile, stuff like that. And the game starts out simple and it kind of becomes more difficult, and so they have these kids go through this and try to see how well they do at this game. That's sort of testing them for decision making and recognizing patterns and executive function. So they do this with a 3-year-old, they do this with a 5-year-olds. But when they do it, they kind of section up the kids into 4 different groups. And the control group, or the kind of the baseline group, they didn't really tell them anything other than just do the game, and if just do the game. And I don't think they gave them any special instructions. And that was kind of the baseline. So think the way you normally think. They had a group where they said their intention with this group was to try to make them more self-absorbed or self-focused than the control group. So they had told them beforehand, hey, if you get stuck, try to think about what you should do. They use the term I a lot. Think to yourself, what would I do? What do I do in this kind of situation? And they try to just get them to be very self-reflective in that way. So there's those 2 groups. They had a group where they tried to get the kids to think in a more third-person way. So they had the kids refer to themselves by name in third person. So I would be going, what would Mike do? How does Mike handle this kind of situation? When the cards are blue and some are red, then what would Mike think about that? So just think in this third person. So a slightly more detached way of thinking, or higher level, however you want to think about it. And then the 4th group, they said, you're going to be a superhero. And it actually wasn't just Batman, but apparently Batman appeared to be the most popular. But the kids could pick. They could be Batman. They could be Rapunzel,
Dora the Explorer.
yeah, and Bob the Builder. So those were their 4 choices. And they even had props. So if you were Batman, you got to wear a Batman cape. If you were Dora the Explorer, you got to wear the backpack. I assume Bob the Builder had the toolbox or something. And then Rapunzel had a bunch of hair. I don't know.
I don't know why they chose Rapunzel, but sure.
I don't know. So they essentially sort of thought of these 4 groups of kids along this spectrum of the most self-focused and then the most self-distant. So you're pretty far outside your own head when you're pretending to be Batman or Bob the Builder. But if you're constantly thinking about yourself and what you are feeling and what am I supposed to do in this situation, then you're very much inside your own head. So they kind of thought of these 4 groups along this line. And then again, they had this set up for the 5-year-olds and they had this set up for the 3-year-olds. And then they're doing this test to see what happened. Okay. Is that a fair characterization of this experiment so far?
Yes. Okay. Sounds like good.
So here's what they found out. This stuff, it actually did matter some, but not much. This really didn't help the 3-year-olds. In fact, if you look at the graphs of how the 3-year-olds performed, it's pretty flat. You know, the ones who were self-absorbed, thinking about I all the time, then the control group, and then the third person group, there really wasn't much difference. There was a bit of an improvement, though, for the, what do they call it? The exemplar group, the group that was pretending to be a superhero. So they got a little bit better, but for the 3-year-olds in general, not a huge difference. But holy crap, for the 5-year-olds, the difference was huge. And it's this line, it actually, it even goes up extra sharp when you get to the superhero group. But the more self-absorbed you are, the more poorly you perform on this test. So telling kids to think about I and you get inside your own head, that made them worse. The control group was a little bit better than that. The third person group was better. And then the superhero group was great. And I loved this about the paper because they tried to put this into context of how big of a difference is this really? Because that's often a problem with some of these scientific papers or findings. Like maybe it's a significant difference, but it doesn't mean it's a practical difference. It actually matters. But if you compare the control with the kids who were pretending to be Batman, the difference was like a full grade level. So the 5-year-olds who were thinking this way, who were pretending to be Batman, they performed as well as 6-year-olds, which when you think about children around that age, that's a massive, massive difference. So just by getting them to think a certain way, they were able to put them up by an entire year of life. And that's, 20% of your life at that point is huge. Huge difference.
Yeah.
Okay. One more thing I want to mention with this paper, and there's some pretty interesting discussion around what they think is happening and all that stuff. So it's really worth checking out if you can. But there was one other factor here that's, I think, worth bringing up. So they also tested the kids on what they called the theory of mind. And this was just to establish a baseline for each kid. I think they did this even before they did this card game type of thing. And they were just trying to see how well does a kid score on this theory of mind spectrum. And apparently this is a pretty common thing in psychology. And it sounds really crazy and existential, but it's pretty simple. You're basically just testing how well does somebody understand that you can control your thoughts and you aren't the same thing as your feelings, or a person can think something that isn't right. Like, how well do you understand the fact that people can be higher level than just basic inputs and outputs? And so this is pretty important for if you're a child and you feel angry and you feel like you want to cry and throw things, and you have no concept of the theory of mind, then you're probably just going to cry and be angry and throw things. But if you understand, hey, I feel this way, but I don't have to do this, I could choose instead to suck it up, then that represents some theory of mind type of thing. That's probably not the greatest definition of that, but I hope that gives the idea. And it's obviously, as you get older, you develop more of a theory of mind that you understand. I can think this way or I can think that way and so on. Okay. So what they found out with this theory of mind was that if you took, let's say, a 5-year-old, and this 5-year-old had not a great concept of this theory of mind, so in some sense they just weren't as developed as somebody else, then they maybe performed at some base level. And then if you had them pretend to be Batman or Bob the Builder, then they would see an improvement. If you took a kid that had a pretty well-developed theory of mind, so they're a little farther along in understanding, their own thoughts and behaviors and stuff, then they actually, from what I remember, they performed about the same. So having a more developed theory of mind just at a baseline, I don't think actually changed their performance that much. But if you took a kid who had a very highly developed theory of mind and you had him pretend to be Batman, he did or she did way better. Like they were the highest performing group, was high theory of mind while also pretending to be a superhero. They just did amazingly well. And then last thing to tie it together, so the authors think that the reason why they didn't see very much difference in the 3-year-olds, but they did in the 5-year-olds, also just kind of relates to this theory of mind thing. And to me, this makes total sense. 3-year-old does not give a crap about much of anything for the most part. They're just kind of doing their stuff. So you have them play a game and they're just going to play the game. And you say, okay, now think about you and yourself and get inside your own head. And they're like, I don't care about that. I hardly know what you're even talking about. We're just playing a game. And the authors pretty much said that. Like, they're 3. I don't think they really got the difference between think about third person, think about, I and me and stuff. But even then, just pretend to be Batman just kind of got them doing a little better. But for the 5-year-olds, they're farther along. They do have this concept of, oh, I'm doing badly. They might be the type that are thinking, maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I'm not the smart ones of the 5-year-olds or something. And so because they have more theory of mind and they tend to be thinking on a higher level, getting them into this exemplar state had an even more of an effect. And it got them to perform, again, an entire grade higher than they would have otherwise.
All right. Why do you think pretending to be Batman makes you so much better? They claim that it's this self-distancing thing. Do you think there's more to that? Do you think they got it right? Let's just talk about that.
Okay.
Why do you think you're so much better if you pretend to be Batman as a 5-year-old? Although, I will also say, I really wish they had done a 3rd study with much older kids. Or maybe a 4th and 5th with adults and then seniors or something. I want more research out of this, but I think these are child development scientists doing this. So I think their concern is mostly with the children. For me, I want to know how this affects everyone.
Right.
But
I don't super care about 5-year-olds. I mean, they're fine, whatever. But I'm selfishly thinking, what does this mean for me and for you and for adults and whatnot? Yeah.
Right.
And you're right. It sounds like the researchers were looking at child psychology. They wanted to know about 5-year-olds and about 3-year-olds, and a lot of what their intended application is to teach kids and to learn about what the best ways to do that are. So what does it mean for us, and how much can we really extrapolate from pretending to be Batman?
Right.
One thought is that, so this is not a foreign concept in the adult world either.
No.
Beyonce has talked about this. She talks about how she has this alter ego of Sasha Fierce, and I don't follow pop music or her very closely, but I have seen some interviews and whatnot, and she released an album called I Am Sasha Fierce or something, and that was like where she had talked about it a lot. But apparently this was a thing that she had been doing for a long time. It almost just something she fell into naturally, where she's going out to perform and wants to project this really confident, powerful persona. She would think, I'm Sasha Fierce now. I'm not Beyonce or whatever. So it happens in the adult world. We know that. There's also a popular, in the StarCraft world, there's a StarCraft streamer who, and this was the first time I'd encountered this idea. So he plays StarCraft and he's good. Like, he's better than I am, good player. But not like terribly high level. So he plays a lot of StarCraft, but then he's excuse me. He started playing World of Warcraft, and he was playing on a roleplay server where you don't just play World of Warcraft, you actually have to pretend to be your character while you're talking, so on voice chat and everything. And yes, this is like the 9th circle of nerdhood. But so he's playing a tank, and so the whole time, and he's really funny. He's a great voice actor type. I think he's actually done some voice acting, but he's, I'm a tank and my name is Torbjorn and blah blah blah. And so just for hours he's just pretending to be this kind of dumb, confident, powerful tank. So whatever, that's World of Warcraft. But then he started doing streams where he would play StarCraft pretending to be his Warcraft character of the tank. So he'd be playing StarCraft going, blah, I'm gonna go attack him and blah, whatever. And his skill he hit his all-time high in terms of performance. And he was like, what the hell is going on? I'm being stupid. I'm just, entertaining people being this dumb, mindless, tank guy from Warcraft while I play StarCraft, and it's making me play better than I ever have before. And then he started researching this and discovered, oh, this is like the Batman effect, this alter ego where you put on this different persona and it makes you better. So I know I'm not answering your question yet, like how does it apply to adults and what's really going on, but this happens in the adult world, so we're not crazy for just saying, hey, let's take this paper about 5-year-olds and try to apply it to ourselves. But
Well,
I've talked for a long time. What do you think is going on? Like, what's your feeling on that?
well, just to add another example, the whole reason why I started looking into alter egos because I was watching this documentary on Eminem, which is I feel like a very popular example of an alter ego. But I guess the story is that early on he was Marshall Mathers Eminem, and apparently his early stuff, if you go back and listen to like Infinite, his early stuff is very, I wouldn't say very tame, but it's much more tame compared to what he did later on. I mean, it's something that your kid could probably listen, with the parents around. Like it was nothing like his later stuff. And it wasn't selling. Like no one was really getting into it. And it wasn't until he developed Slim Shady that kind of gave him this outlet to be able to say whatever he wanted to say. I just think it gives you this ability, or at least in this case, it gives you this ability to say things that you don't want attached to your normal identity. He can say all of these offensive, controversial things, and it's almost like he didn't say it. And so he can just kind of, use that as some sort of outlet. But so that's what got me started down this road of alter egos. Like, well, if it worked for him, what would the equivalent be for me or for anyone else? And is this something that actually works really well? And how do you tap into that? How do you access that? I guess I never knew about Sasha Fierce, but I guess that's a super popular thing. So it's definitely something that takes place all the time, or at least for some people.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go back to, before we get too far into what to do, let's go back to what might actually be happening here. So there's one thing in particular from this paper that I was so happy to find. This is one sentence. The authors are talking about this game that they're playing with kids, with the cards and everything. And one of the things the game is designed to test is what's called perseverative errors. I think I'm saying that correctly. Sorry if I'm not. I found a bunch of conflicting pronunciations about it, so sorry. But perseverative errors. And I've been searching for this term for so long because I've observed it in myself and I've seen it in other people. And I've thought, what is this thing that keeps happening? It's like this very distinct type of mistake. And I finally found the name for it. So what this is when they actually, I found an example that they do with infants, because sometimes they want to test stuff on infants and you're pretty limited on what you could do with an infant. So one of the only tests that they've been able to figure out is you have an infant, maybe the mother's holding it or something, and you're sitting across a table from it. So you have some toy that the baby likes, and there's two boxes in front of you, box A and box B. So you put the toy in box A, and then the baby wants the toy, so it kind of reaches towards box A and like kind of grabs at it, and they pull out the toy or something. So cool. And then you do the same thing again. You put the toy in box A, let the baby reach after it, pull it out, so on. You do this like several times, and then you take the toy and you put it in box B. And the baby, because babies are pretty dumb, reaches for box A. And the reason is because the baby is making a perseverative error. The baby has established that I reach for box A and I get a reward. And oh, look, it worked again, and it kind of reinforces this behavior. But now the circumstances have changed, but the baby tries to do the same thing because that was what was leading to rewards in the past. And you might think, wow, babies are really dumb. I don't do that kind of thing, but you do it all the time, just on a more subtle scale, where you're thinking in some certain way, you're focused on one thing, and then circumstances change, and your focus or your way of thinking or the thing that you're trying to do is not able to change quickly enough to reflect the new circumstances. This is one of the things they tested with this game, was these perseverative errors, where you might lay out some cards in front of a kid and say, okay, put the red cards on the left and the blue cards on the right. They go, okay, and you do it again, put the red cards on the left, blue cards on the right. Then you do another one, you say, okay, now sort them by something else, like the way they're pointed, or put the things that are animals on the left and the things that aren't animals on the right. And the kid still sorts them by color, or they make some mistake that falls along those lines of, oh, they weren't sure, so they'd use the colors instead of using what they were supposed to. That's a perseverative error, where it's a chronology error. It's where your mind is still doing something that used to work but doesn't anymore. And that's one of the particular types of executive function errors that they are testing for with this. And so the thinking is that the closer you are, the more, what did they call it again? Not self-absorbed. Oh yeah, or like the more self-distant you are, the more you're able to see the bigger picture and you go, oh, it's different now. Batman's gonna do this thing. Whereas when you're very self-absorbed and focused inside your own head, you aren't able to make those, or to see those kinds of differences. So that may be one of the biggest things that this self-distancing practice is doing, is helping eliminate these perseverative errors, where you're able to see the bigger picture. And we had talked about this without maybe having the right terminology for it, of this tight focus and then dilated focus. And it's one of the biggest things that, remember when we did the puzzle storm
Right.
talk, and we were talking about that particular chess exercise, and the design of that exercise is to try and get you to be able to be, in some sense, more self-distant, where you're seeing the bigger picture and you're less likely to make these perseverative errors where you're hyper focused on something. So that seems to be one of the key things that's happening here, is eliminating this particular type of error.
Yeah. And we also talked about this when we were talking about switching from a manager role to CEO role, and then artist role or programmer role. And like you have to put on these different costumes and become a different identity to see things in a different way. So this shows up a lot. But one thought I had because you see these results improve, right? You throw on the Batman cape and all of a sudden the results improve. And then they say, okay, well, it's because of the self-distancing. That could totally be the case, and I think it's very likely. But there's another example that they did, or another experiment that they did. Same thing, same researchers, but instead of the cards, they used this box. And so in front of the kids, they have this clear box, and they put a toy that the kid really wants to play with inside of the box, and then they lock it. And then they give the kid a giant ring of a bunch of keys, and they say, okay, now open the box. And the trick is, it seems really mean, but there is no key that unlocks the box. And so what they're measuring is how long the kid continues to try to open the box, which is just torturous. But that was another experiment.
Yeah.
And I thought that one's a little bit easier to understand with this experiment than the cards, because I don't think they went into a ton of detail on the cards. But I was thinking that, you have this kid that needs to open a box. And the reward for them, let's say they're not doing the Batman thing. It's just a person with, they're not trying to get them to self-distance or whatever. The reward for that kid is the toy inside of the box. So everything they have to do in order to get into the box is just an obstacle in their way, right? So there is no enjoyment in trying to open the box. That's just stupid. They want to get that over with and get to the toy. But if you throw on a Batman costume and say, hey, you're Batman now, solve this puzzle, they're like, oh, cool. And like the entire action of trying to unlock the lock becomes interesting and fun. And, oh, I'm this cool superhero. If this didn't work, I'll try the next one. It's this exciting thing. And I guess that's probably a result of self-distancing, or taking a different point of view. But I also just think it's an interesting. I don't know if you would call that self-distancing, and I think it might be another aspect of this that maybe they didn't consider, or maybe they're considering it
Yeah.
part of self-distancing. I don't know. But what do you think?
So I love that you brought that up because that is genuinely not something I'd even thought about, is that you might be just changing the way somebody thinks to cause them to enjoy the process. I have a bit of a problem with the keys in the box experiment, because really the correct answer is to be the first one to quit, because you can't open the box with those keys. So I'm not exactly
Right.
sure. Like you have to be kind of careful what you read into that. The kid that gets frustrated and throws it down, they were right.
Right.
They should be frustrated. They got tricked, right? So, what are you testing
Right.
here? But so there was another one. This was I think from the same researchers, or at least they were referencing this. But they were talking about the famous marshmallow experiment, which I'm sure you've heard
Yeah.
of. This thing where you can say, okay, kid, you can have one marshmallow now, or if you wait, you get to have two or something. And so it's kind of a BS experiment actually, because uh, originally the researchers had claimed that if you do this test to a kid, it represents how well they're going to do in life, and the kids who wait longer are going to have better jobs and stuff. And it turns out that that is almost certainly not the case. And if you actually look at the statistics, it's really not how it works out. So don't pretend like you can predict little children's future just by doing some dumb test. But it was still interesting because you get to see what is happening and what causes a kid to wait longer or not, and what are they doing, and why is there a difference between different people. And so one of the things they observed was that uh, there was these kind of almost coping strategies or things that kids did to try and make it less painful to have to sit there and wait and stare at a marshmallow. And one of the things they mentioned was this pretend play, where a kid would pretend that they were feeding the marshmallow to an invisible friend, or their pet horse or something like that. So they're going through this just play, pretend mimicry thing where they're just acting like they're doing something fun, instead of just sitting there and agonizing over the fact that they want to eat this marshmallow but can't. And I think I hadn't thought this way when I was reading this, but now that you bring it up, that sounds exactly right. That in a sense you're almost cheating, because you aren't sitting there going, "Oh, I want that marshmallow so bad." You're just doing something
Right.
else, having fun, goofing around, playing pretend with your horse, and now you're not thinking so much about wanting the marshmallow. You're just thinking about how you're got this cool imaginary pet horse.
Yeah. See, to me, you throw on the Batman costume and you move the game from trying to get to that toy to let's play pretend where we can, solve a puzzle or whatever. And of course they're going to do that for longer. So the way this would apply to me or to other adults is, it if I want to do a painting and the thing that I want the most is a finished painting, right? Everything in the way, like if the reward is the finished painting, then everything in the way is just an obstacle and something I'm going to be impatient with. If you're running a race and the only thing you care about is a really good time at the end, then the whole
Mm-hmm.
race might be really frustrating to you. And if you're trying to write a song, if all you care about is having a really good song at the end, then the songwriting process might be really frustrating and something you just want to rush through. And so, if you were able to take a different approach, it doesn't have to be Batman. I don't know how much Batman wants to paint a picture or write a song, but if you took on a different identity that enjoyed, the whole process and moved the reward from the end to the entire thing, it would definitely bring different results. Where you might enjoy that the entire process, and then the end is just this byproduct.
Yeah, it almost feels like cheating, in that you're you're like sidestepping the thing that everyone else is struggling with so much, and you're just doing something else.
Right.
Or I mean, technically with the box thing, the kid who got bored and forgot to stop trying keys and just started goofing around with a piece of fuzz, he was the ultimate champion of the box test. because he just stopped caring and got disinterested. Um,
Well, maybe that's why they did the card game for the research paper.
yeah, maybe. No, I like them
But
both.
you
They're
know,
both really interesting things to
yeah.
illustrate.
But with the cards, I just have a harder time wrapping my head around it because I can't see them playing. I don't totally know exactly what they were doing. So
They didn't explain this very well in the paper. I went because I got so excited about learning this term, perseverative error, which again I've it's been years. I've recognized this in myself and in others and thought, oh, this is such an important thing, but I just don't really know how to talk about it. I got really excited, and so
say
I
it
went
again.
and researched that. Don't
It's
learn it from me
it's
because I don't know if
well,
this is
okay.
right.
Well, the thing that you are talking about, whether or not it is actually the term you're using, but it's your tendency to use things that worked before, right?
So
Whether or
think of
not they
yeah, think of the term perseverance, right? Same similar word, perseverative error. It's like you're persevering, but you're not supposed to. You were supposed to change and recognize something else. See this, okay, StarCraft example, because I like giving examples that no one can relate to. So if you look at a really high level StarCraft player, in a sense, the name of the game with StarCraft, which is a real time strategy game where you're trying to manage a million things at once and be more efficient and better than your opponent. So in a sense, the name of the game is to do the most important thing in the game as quickly as you can, and then as soon as it's done, go do the next most important thing. And so you're trying to very quickly, I mean, you can see the camera jumping, the player is taking as many actions as they can in this really small amount of time. So if you look at really high level players, pro players, you can watch it from their perspective. They might have some battle that's about to happen. And so they'll, click some of their units and move them over here, and they'll cast some spells, and they'll do, all the things that they need to do. And it's like the instant that they're done, the camera jumps somewhere else and they're doing some other thing. They spend exactly the right amount of time that they need to take this action to make sure they've set things up correctly, and then they're gone. They're doing the next important thing. And if you watch a somewhat lower level player, what you'll see is that their camera's there, they take these same actions. Let's say they're pretty good and they, do roughly as good as the pro player did. They move their army in the right spot, they cast the spells in the right place, but the camera lingers. They're sitting there kind of staring at it, and it's not for very long. Maybe it's for 300 milliseconds, a third of a second, not very long, but they're lingering. Their mind is still focused on the thing in front of them, even after the window of efficient time has passed, and it takes just a little bit longer for their mind to switch into that other thing that they need to do. And so compared to this pro player, they're a little bit behind. They've just lingered too long on this thing. Sometimes it can be way more dramatic, so that's a really tiny error, but it could be that you're just taking the wrong approach. Maybe you, I don't know, use some particular technique to paint a painting and it came out really good. And so you go to do another one and you're like, that came out great. I got to do that thing again. And so you take that same technique and you apply it when you kind of shouldn't anymore. Maybe the style's different, or the thing that the painting needs to represent is this is a stupid example. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you get the idea. Like, you're clinging to something that worked before without recognizing that the circumstances are different and you need to adjust your way of thinking. It's a hard to explain thing because it's one of those things that's just kind of hard to talk about, but it's such a common fundamental error in the way humans behave. And I'm just so happy to have identified it as, like, it has a name.
well, yes, I think this is the same thing, or at least similar. But I do this. I used to do it way more often. Back when I was writing music, if I wrote something I really liked, I get the reward. I write it. It sounds great. I'm like, yes, that worked. Well, I'll go back to that same song and change, 3 notes. And then I'm thinking, I did it again. It worked again. And then I'll just keep messing with that single song, trying to, drain the well of all the rewards and just like bleed it dry, and I'll just sit on that one thing, that one success for a month instead of just, making new ones and moving on. I just want to try to repeat that same thing over and over. And with paintings, if I If I feel like I don't know, finished or almost finished and it worked really well, I'll just keep messing with it over and over again, trying
Right.
to bleed it dry of all rewards. And
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
maybe I
just
should,
like
yeah.
you're just like the baby who keeps reaching for box A because that had the toy in it before and it worked, and so you keep doing that same action. That's exactly what that is.
They should have put a Batman costume on the baby. See if that
It,
changed it. But
I mean, it
yeah.
helped clearly. Okay, okay. Um, so that's maybe a couple different theories on what's happening, right? That
Yeah.
it's eliminating perseverative errors. You said it's causing you to enjoy the process itself or kind of frame it differently in your mind, rather than just focusing on the outcome. And to me, I think there's a lot that goes along with that. There's the self-worth question, the how am I doing? Am I smart or am I dumb kind of stuff that comes along with thinking about the outcome and yourself and everything. Whereas separating yourself from that just kind of eliminates it, where you're like, Batman doesn't think about that. Batman solves the problem.
Right,
And
right.
right. So
Well,
there's that.
yeah, Batman wouldn't get distracted. He wouldn't get bored, you know. He's
Right.
super focused and yeah.
Yeah. Batman's not going to fall down on the ground and cry. He's freaking Batman. So,
Yeah.
so okay, one more I want to add to that list before we move on. And the authors brought this up was maybe it's just confidence. Or you pretend to be Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Batman is a powerful, confident superhero type character, so you're confident. Which I've always had a bit of a problem with, just thinking about confidence, because at on first thought you think, why confidence? What does that do? What does that mean? So that's a feeling, right? You just feel like you're good at something. How would that change what you're actually doing? And
Right. Thinking about confidence as a singular thing, or a standalone thing, I've always had a problem with.
Yeah,
Because
same.
yeah, but okay, continue.
Okay, so here's my why I've changed on that, or I think I just understand this better. So there's this thing that happens to me, where I'm gonna go back to StarCraft again. Let's say I play StarCraft, and I I'm gonna try to give this example. I got excited about this after I read this paper. I haven't played since we talked, 6 weeks ago or something, and I got really excited. I was like, I have to test it out. I have to play StarCraft just to see, because that's my testing ground. That's where I find out if this stuff works.
Yeah.
So there's this cycle that I'll go through. And I think I mentioned this before, but here's a really short version. I start playing, and I play really well. I'm focused the way I ought to be. I'm doing all the right things. My mind's in the right place. I'm feeling good. Maybe the cards are just kind of lining up in my favor for whatever reason. So I'm playing well. And I get done with this session, and I'm like, wow, I won a lot. That's great. I'm playing good. And so I stop for the night, take a shower, I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm pretty good now. Like I'm really playing all right. And then I come back to it the next day, and almost invariably, I play terrible. And I think what's happening is that my mentality sort of rots overnight, to where in the first session, I'm focused on the game. I'm doing all the things that I think you're supposed to do. But in the second session, I'm thinking about myself and how I'm good now and how, everything is going right. And I'm thinking about playing the game instead of thinking about the game. And this is such a subtle thing, but I think it's really key. They talk about self-distancing, but that is the wrong kind of self-distancing. This is a bad sort of self-distancing where you're not putting yourself into this mindset where you're able to see the big picture, and you're not perseverating on certain things and making these types of errors, and you're able to move around and adjust and absorb. Like, that is the type of self-distancing that you want. What you don't want is to start this meta thinking of, oh, I think I'm playing really good right now. I think that decision I just made was probably a good decision that I just made. And I think that, this player is weaker than me, so I think I can beat them now. Like, you're not thinking about the game anymore, even though it feels like you're thinking on a higher level. You're thinking about the game. It's
Right.
I hope I'm explaining that right because it's such a key thing.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
I have definitely felt that same way all the time. It's almost like every other day is that. You know, one
Yeah.
day you're in the zone and you're great, so then you feel great about it, and then the next
Right.
day you go to do the thing, and that's all you can think about it, so it sucks, and then you're back to square one again. Yeah, every
And
other
you
day.
and just think about how good you could do if that didn't happen. If you just kept,
Right.
but of course you can't. If you think about that, then you're thinking about, and it
Right.
doesn't work. Okay. Okay. So confidence. Confidence is when you don't really question your decisions. You make a choice and you do it and you think, I don't care. I'm confident. I'm going to just believe that that was the right decision and not worry about it. And I think that that's why that is such a important thing. It's not arrogance. It's not thinking, "Oh, I'm great. I'm so much better than everyone else." That's a little different. It's confidence and just not questioning. And so in that sense, you're spending your brain cycles on the thing, you're making the best choices that you can, and that's it. You're not thinking about it anymore because you are confident. You make a choice and that's your choice and you let it go. And I think that that is why that's so important, is that you aren't getting into that higher level self-analysis thing.
Right. It's the inner game of tennis thing.
Yeah, it's exactly the inner game of tennis, just with more science.
So the thinking is that you throw on the Batman costume, and then you're just more confident because Batman is confident, and therefore you're not second guessing. Because if
Yeah.
you were second guessing, you'd be wasting all of this mental energy and going
Yeah.
back and forth and becoming frustrated.
Yeah. Okay, so just to continue to sum up here. So there's seeing the bigger picture, not making these perseverant errors. There's what you said, like reframing the situation in a way where it becomes enjoyable by itself. You're not so focused on reward and self value and whatnot. There's just the confidence factor in the sense that you aren't questioning your decisions anymore. You're just making the best choice quickly and feeling good about that choice without worrying about it, right? Because that's just extra time spent thinking about irrelevant things and hesitating and questioning. So that's not good. Is there anything else to add to that list? I feel like I had one more thought, but now it's gone.
Well, I don't have it either. So
Okay. Um, well, I'll just say this. I think most of these ideas aren't new at all. You know, we've talked about a lot of this before. The the $1 million question is, okay, yeah, you're not supposed to be judging yourself. You're not supposed to be, hesitating and not confident and so on, right? Like, duh, everybody knows that. How do you do it? What's the trick? How do you make it to where you don't go through this pendulum cycle of doing well and doing terrible because now you think you're good, which makes you not good? Like, how do you avoid all that stuff? And this, I'm excited about this line of thinking because one, it proves that this is a valid way of doing it, and it kind of gives you a vehicle to think, okay, this is an avenue for trying to solve those problems. It's such a hard problem to solve because it's like it's a problem that you have to solve by not thinking about. You can't think about how you're spending too much time thinking about it because that's spending too much time thinking about it. It's a difficult thing to pull off.
how do you do it?
Well, according to this, it's pretend to be Batman. But let's talk about that part of the question, which is okay. We're talking. The experiment was on 5-year-olds and 3-year-olds. They pretended to be Batman or the Explorer or Bob the Builder or Rapunzel. As an adult, I mean, should you literally do that? Should you pretend to be Bob the Builder?
Well, I think we need to define a task because, you know, if you're playing a card game, sure, maybe you can be Batman, even as an adult.
Sure.
But, you know, what about other things? You know, what is it we're like if you're mopping the floors, right? And you need to stay focused on mopping the floors, you're not going to choose Batman. Maybe you'll choose
Right.
Alfred, you know, because Alfred would clean it up. The butler. I don't know. You know,
I know
You
who
know,
Alfred is.
okay. Well, what's the thing we're trying to do?
Yeah.
You know, but for me with painting, I'm not going to dress like Batman and do a painting. Like that's dumb.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of different artists that I look up to, and there's a lot of times where I feel like I'm sort of channeling them. You know, I feel like them. I'm trying to, not even trying. I'm thinking like them because I know them so well because I've spent so much time, you know, learning about them. There's a lot of times when I'm painting where I feel like I am them in some aspect. And you know, I'll watch a TV show. Like I'll binge watch a TV show, and I will catch myself acting like one of the characters from the TV show. It's like for whatever reason I've just picked up this thing. Like I remember when I watched Monk in high school, I would watch that all the time. You know, the OCD detective, and I started keeping my room spotlessly clean and randomly
Yeah.
touching things like at first just for fun, and then it became a habit, and I did it, and it was, I don't know, I just felt like Monk in a lot of situations, which is not good, but I don't know, I
Well,
picked up these things, and it, you know, it was like throwing on the Batman cape
yeah.
and becoming like a different character, you know, not in some grand way, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I was just gonna say that I went through that same thing, except I was watching Trailer Park Boys, so I just
Right.
started talking like I had to stop. I mean, I thought to myself, I this is no good. I have to stop watching this show or at least slow it down because I really am just starting to sound like, you know, Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys, and that's not great.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
Um,
that still doesn't answer the question, but I guess what
yeah.
I'm saying is that for whatever task you're doing, you know, who would do it the best, you know? And try to get into their character and see what they would do. I mean, you know, we're kind of talking about alter egos with, you know, with Beyonce, you got
Hmm.
Sasha Fierce or, you know, Slim Shady or whatever. Well, Beyonce doesn't have Slim Shady, though that would be interesting to see. But, you know, those are like, you know, severe alter egos or you know, completely different characters. But
Hmm.
I feel like this happens all the time on a very on a much smaller scale, where you know I can literally sort of slip into a character of someone that I just, you know, admire while I'm doing a certain task, you know, without throwing on a cape or a hat or
Or
whatever,
do it.
calling
I
myself
mean,
something else. Yeah,
maybe you do want to be really silly and dramatic about it. Why not? I, okay, I want to tell one more little story here because I think it fits this pretty well. So I went to get my eyes looked at a little while ago, and I was having some kind of weird stuff going on, so we're doing a bunch of imaging and everything. And so I go to my appointment, and the I don't know what they're called, like the it's like the dental assistant version for an optometrist, like the person who just does all the stuff before the actual doctor shows up and, you know, ask you all the questions and do all the imaging and all that kind of thing. So I had this person who was my tech type person, and I don't even know how to express this fully, but she was so incompetent and bad at everything that she did that it at first was frustrating, but it very quickly became just comical. Like it was so absurd, it was almost hard to even believe. And I'm not talking about this to try and be mean or to make fun of somebody. It actually, I think, is a really interesting experience that I've just been thinking about ever since. To this person, I mean, I kid you not, every single thing that she did was a disaster. I mean, it didn't matter what it was. We go in to do some of this imaging stuff, and there's this machine that looks in your eye and takes these pictures and whatnot. And so she's messing with it, like, okay, put your eye up to it, and she gives me these really weird kind of conflicting instructions. So I'm kind of like, I don't know. And then she takes a picture. She's like, oh no, it didn't take it right. I think something's wrong. And then she's getting all frustrated. And then she's, oh my god, it deleted the pictures. I think they're gone now. We have to do it again. And then we do it again. Like, oh, they deleted them again. just this, I mean, it was wild. And then, I mean, this, I swear she had to ask somebody to help her at least half a dozen times, probably more. And this person walks in very calm. Oh, okay, what's going on? Like, the machine, it deleted all the pictures that I took. She's like, no, you just have to scroll down a little bit. You're at the top of the window. You gotta they're right here. Like, oh my God, I tried that and it didn't work. Right? This just goes on for way, way too long. It's just, so again, here's the reason why I bring this up. It was, this person was very vocal. She was just talking through her thoughts the whole way through. And what she would do is, anytime something happened, no matter how trivial it was, if she's looking at the machine and she doesn't see the pictures that were just taken, instead of doing what you ought to do, is to just kind of think like, okay, I don't see them. Where are they? Well, I see a scroll bar. I'm gonna scroll down or whatever, right? Like, you just kind of reason through this stuff. She would get upset almost instantly and go, oh, the universe is against me today. She said this probably 100 times. Like, oh, it's just one of those days. Like, the universe is punishing me or something. She had this weird externalization of this. We got into the room and she was trying to unlock the computer to, start entering data and stuff as she asked me questions and things. And so she types in the passcode and it's like, wrong passcode. And so, okay, most people, I think the number is 3, right? This is pretty typical. You put in a password and it's wrong. And you're like, oh, I probably typed it wrong. So you type in it again and it's wrong again. And you're like, okay, I'm going to try one more time. You try one more time. And if on time number 3 it doesn't work, you're like, okay, I think maybe the password is wrong or something. But no, she blew right past number 3. She just types it over and over, thinking, oh my God, the stupid machine. I hate technology. It's one of those days. The universe, blah, blah, blah. And okay, this is not a nuclear code. This is literally a 4-digit pin, just 4 numbers, right? But she just burns right through it until the computer locks her out for the next hour. And then it's this whole disaster of having to call somebody else. And there's, 20 minutes of them trying to figure out how to she locked herself out, right? Okay. Here's why this is interesting to me. So again, she has this mindset of, anytime something goes wrong, it becomes it's upsetting, it's frustrating, and she externalizes it in this blame the world kind of way. But I'm with her for a while, in part because the stuff has taken so long. And so anything related to the job, it's this upset of, the universe hates me. Never just a calm thinking through whatever's going on. Never just stopping to think, you know what? This is only 4 digits. Maybe somebody changed it, or I just have the wrong thing on the post-it note. Let me just ask somebody or double check or something. No, just not doing that. But as soon as the conversation went to something else, that just disappeared. Because she was not a dumb person. That's kind of what this sounds like, but she wasn't. She genuinely was not. We were talking about, oh, she has a kid and a dog and all this stuff, and oh yeah, and I like hobbies and whatnot, and like that was just gone. She's just a perfectly competent, intelligent person to have a conversation with. But for whatever reason, there was this mindset that had developed around the job. And I'm sure it was, ironically, probably because the job is important and she's worried about performing well. Maybe she just doesn't feel confident or whatever the case. So this sort of coping mechanism has developed somehow where anything that goes wrong, her mind immediately jumps to this thing. And again, it was interesting because she was so vocal about it and you could hear this. She was just narrating all of her thoughts, where most people don't do that. They might have some kind of maladaptive thought pattern, but it's usually pretty internal and it's hard to see from the exterior. But for me, I'm just listening to her talk. I'm like, wow, this is, it sucks, but it's also really interesting. So here's the point of that kind of weird story. Looking at that, and I try to talk to her like, oh, hey, maybe, you think maybe the passcode's wrong or something or whatever. Like, oh yeah, I know, it's just one of those days. Like, trying to be relaxed and try to get her to just slow down a little bit. And it really just wasn't working because she did not know that was happening. She's not there thinking, I have a maladaptive thought pattern. I've developed this persona and thought, the way of thinking that is going so terribly wrong I need to think another way. I need to be calm. I need to be rational. I need to just observe things and look and search for an answer and not get upset and frustrated. But like, she doesn't know that's happening. And we are all like that. Maybe not in that dramatic of a way, although maybe we are. I mean, genuinely, who knows? It's just, you live inside your head so much that it just feels like reality. And you could tell her, hey, let's just slow down. Let's just, see, let's look. And it didn't work. She was at a point where it wasn't just, okay, take a breath. It was like she needed to just think completely differently. And that's so hard to do, because just trying to kind of nudge your thoughts in the right direction sometimes is not enough. You're on the wrong planet of thinking, and you need to just be somewhere else entirely. And to me, that's what is so interesting and appealing about the role play type of thing, where it's like this full on reset of, I'm not even me anymore. I am someone else. My brain is different. The way I think is different. I'm not Beyonce. I'm Sasha Fierce, or I'm not Marshall Mathers. I'm Slim Shady or whatever. Yeah. It's just like, sometimes you just have to have that full reset, because you're just too deep in your own thoughts. Like, a little bit of change is just that's not it. That's not enough. That's not going to get you there. That's my story.
Well, it's a great story. I feel a little bad for this person, but
But again, I want to stress that it was very kind of frustrating and sad for me, because I'm talking to her thinking, she's not like this. This is not her. She does not interact with the world this way. This is happening in her job, and it sucks, because if she's not fired by now, she will be soon. Unless she changes the way she thinks. And I mean, it's like, it could be done.
Yeah, I'm sure it worked out great.
Yeah.
Anyway. Oh, okay. When you switch into a different identity, say like your StarCraft player with the tank, or I don't know, switch into Batman, this thing changes with your decision making, where like the decider in you, or the part of you that makes that decision.
Yeah.
When you are just yourself, if you're too focused on yourself, that becomes like the biggest thing in your mind. Oh, I feel like getting up and walking away and giving up, or I feel, distracted, or I feel whatever. And these big feelings sort of take over if you focus on them, right? I mean, you're in the I way of thinking, or you're just thinking about yourself. So all these feelings become like the decider, because they're the biggest thing. So that's what you're focused on. When you switch into a different identity, say like Batman or whatever, the decider becomes something completely different. You view all of those impulses and feelings as immaterial, because Batman does not care about distractions or giving up.
Right.
He cares about the big picture and these more important things. And so it's like you shift the decider of decisions. And yeah, being able to figure out where that should be is probably the most important thing. Like, this is so complicated. The guy playing StarCraft, he's this other character, just having fun, not really caring too much about things, just in this totally different thing. Why do you think it was that he's able to play his best? Is it because he's sort of able to back away from those feelings that don't matter, and then,
Okay, so
like, why are the results better? If you're pretending to be someone else, you would think that person wouldn't know, like some tank guy from World of Warcraft doesn't know how to play StarCraft.
Right.
So why does he play better than the guy that knows how to play StarCraft?
Okay, this is very out of character for me, but I'm going to not actually talk about StarCraft in response to a direct question about StarCraft, and I'm going to talk about being a teacher when I was teaching music.
Okay.
Because I think I hit my quota for StarCraft talk today. So one of the things I would witness when I was teaching a lot, I'd have some people where I'd be teaching them just how to play piano, and we'd play in songs or whatnot, or play guitar. But some were really interested in writing music. And so we would start to talk about that, and we'd start to practice that. And they would write songs or little bits of songs and riffs and things like that. And we'd try to develop it and so on. And the biggest problem out of all the problems that you would conceive of, the biggest problem that I had with these people, some kids, some adults, was that they would write something and they would really like it, which, okay, that's great, but they would get stuck on it. You were kind of saying the same thing, like with music, even, where you write a song. I mean, I had kids who would write something and then they were like, okay, how do I copyright it? Somebody wanted to hear it, but I don't know, what if they steal it? And, I'm not a jerk, so I'm not going to say, look, your song kind of sucks. You're 5. Don't worry about it. Nobody's stealing your stuff. But, like, that's kind of your thought. Like, okay, it's fine. But they would get so fixated and stuck on this thing, unable to think, you know what? If I'm going to be a great composer, I need to write 10,000 pieces. I need to write, hundreds of hours of music just to develop my skill for being good at this. Like, the first song that I write in my life is not going to be that great, but they can't get past that. Or, oh, I wrote this riff and it's gotta be amazing. And we would get stuck on this thing. And that's just how we think. In StarCraft specifically. Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
You broke the, yeah.
I know. That is the kind of thing that will happen where you think, I have this play style that I'm good at, and I have to do that. I have to execute it right. I have to, like, oh, I'm fighting. I have to make sure that I take the best fight possible. And so you're getting kind of stuck on these things, and the dumb Warcraft tank thinks, oh, time to go do this, time to go do that. Oh, my army's dying. I don't care. And it winds up getting you to just see everything, to where, again, with these perseverative errors, you don't make them anymore because you just don't care that much. Like, you're not that hyper fixated person. You write a song, you think, okay, time to write the next one, or whatever. Like, you're not
your self distance.
Yeah, you're
So,
self
actually,
distancing.
So I guess I went on a bit of a rap kick, but I was watching this thing from Snoop Dogg, and Snoop Dogg used to be good friends with and record with Tupac, and Tupac is arguably one of, if not the best rapper of all time. I like Biggie too, but let's just say Tupac is the best.
Pretend I have an opinion there.
Oh, whatever. Anyway, Snoop Dogg was saying when Tupac would go into the studio to record a song, he would record a song. As soon as it's over, he would say, give me the next tape. He would record another song. And then as soon as that's done, he would grab another one. Whereas anyone else would record one and then go back and redo it and fix it up and edit it and whatever and make sure it's perfect. He would just blast through them one after the other. And he had complete detachment from whatever he just did. So he was able to just keep moving and moving. So and that's the same way that I see a lot of, artists, like the really good ones. They do something and they just move to the next one and the next one. Whereas, in the past, I've gotten like, I'll just obsess over that same thing. Like the student kid who writes one song, then they want to copyright it and become rich off of it and, win a Emmy or Grammy or whatever. They just...
Gramophone
Grammy
is the thing that makes sound. So Grammy, that's how I remember it. So I don't know who Emmy is, but something else.
But anyway, that's exactly what they're saying. It's the self-distancing aspect of it, is that you are detached from that part of you that wants to return to that reward and just bleed it dry.
Yeah. Okay.
This is spiraled in all different directions. I mean, just throwing on a Batman cape apparently is really complicated and can suggest so many different things. So I'm kind of okay with going all over the place, but maybe we can reel it back in.
Yeah, well, just to reel it back in a little bit. You were earlier kind of saying how being Batman is not always the I mean, Batman is this powerful, confident superhero type person who is selfless and, out there to do the right thing and whatnot. And like, that's not always the thing that you're trying to emulate, but thinking about whatever it is that you're doing or trying to excel at, thinking about the type of person who would, and then pretending to be them, I think is the trick. That's what you're after. And I tried this for StarCraft, literally, I mean, pretending to be Batman, where I'm playing the game like I'm Batman, and it didn't work that well. And what ended up working a lot better was to sit there and watch some first-person perspective footage of Cyril, who's like my favorite pro player, play, and listen to him talk, literally just thinking out loud and watching him play. And then as I'm playing the game, just try and emulate him. Like, what would Cyril do? What does it look like when he plays? I want to look like that. And it feels weird because you are having to let go of the things that you normally do. You're normally fixated. You're normally, oh God, I have to do this because I can win. And to think that way, it feels very strange. Like you're just letting go of, okay, I'm going to do what Cyril does. I'm playing pretend. I'm not actually playing the way that feels like the best way to play.
Right.
And you wind up playing better because you're, again, going back to the eye doctor person, you just have to get, it's so hard to get out of your head. I think that's really for me, the key thing with this role play thing is that you, by definition, you get out of your head. You pretend to be someone else. You just sidestep all of these, maybe I need to slow down. Maybe I need to whatever. Like, forget about the way you think and just think something totally different.
Yeah, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, of course. But it's also really fun. Like, it's actually fun. Yeah. Like you were saying, for some of these kids doing these things, like it some of the benefit was just that they enjoyed the process, where it wasn't this torturous, frustrating thing. It was like, I'm playing pretend. I'm Batman right now. This is fun. Like, it's more fun to play a game wearing a cape, pretending to be Batman. And also you perform dramatically better than everyone else. So that's just pretty cool.
I was watching this class from Natalie Portman on acting, just because I thought it'd be interesting, and it was. And she was talking about how to get into character, and she was saying that there's all this science about how your physical appearance influences you into, it gives you the cue of that character. So she was saying, you can practice the character and everything, but once you put on the clothes and do the hair and hold the props or whatever, then you sort of transform, and your brain is picking up these cues from physical things and making you that character. And I've noticed this with myself, just very simply. If I dress nice and feel, decent looking, then I feel more confident in my everyday life, and I will draw better, and I will paint better, and I will just be better simply by just the way I can dress, or just simple things like that. If you dress like a slob, you will view yourself as a slob mostly, and you will then act accordingly. So like you pick up these cues, and sometimes they're just really simple, but if you feel like a failure, you will act like a failure. And we talked about this a long time ago, is that if you're trying to achieve, I don't know, some big thing, if you can't believe that you can do it, you literally just can't do it, because your brain won't allow you to do it. So if you don't believe in yourself, you literally just can't do it. So that aspect of believing in yourself becomes extremely important. I remember years ago, we used to mow lawns together, me and my friend. And then we decided to go totally different ways. I wanted to become an artist, and he wanted to become a Green Beret, which, if you don't know, it's like this 5-year-long training to get into this like special forces, like the most extreme type of training ever. And it's 5 years long, and a very small percentage of people ever get through it. But he did get through it. But anyway, we would just talk about that kind of thing. And one thing he would do, I can't remember if this was part of the actual training or like the pre-training to get into the training or whatever, but he would have this like mantra thing, taped to his mirror. And this is I guess what a lot of them did. And he would read through this thing, I am this person or whatever. I don't know. Whatever you need to know in order to get through that training.
Like it, but this one is mine.
Yeah, I think maybe. But anyway, he had this thing and he would read that like every morning in the mirror and tell himself. And I was like, okay, well, I'll give that a shot. But because I was having so much trouble just believing that I could ever be a concept artist or an illustrator and ever make it. And there were times where I just felt like I could not do it. And I knew I had to get past that if I ever wanted to be successful at it. And so I would tell myself, even though it felt silly at first, I'd tell myself in the mirror, it's like, you will be a concept artist. You'll, whatever, this will work. Like your plan's going to work. And I felt really stupid at first, but I think that was probably one of the most important things that I ever did because I don't know, there was something with just cueing myself into really believing that I am that person that, I just created by telling myself I was that person. But something happened that really helped me believe in myself. And so it was as if I was putting on the Batman cape, right? Just like my friend was doing or whatever. It worked. I'm not saying it's magic or whatever, but I think I was creating this character and then acting as if I was that character. Like, I am going to be successful. Now I can act accordingly. You know?
We just read a paper that was published in a journal demonstrating with like numbers and graphs and stuff about how that really did work. I mean, again, it's for 5-year-olds and it really didn't work for 3-year-olds. So you have to be careful what you take from it. But at least in that context,
if you're 3 years old and listening to this,
yeah, might not work for you. Yeah.
Right.
But it provably works. Okay, it provably works. And okay, this is my last thing, and then I'm out. One of the things that is striking to me that's just been kind of just surprising as we've talked through this over the past year or even 2 years or whatever, is how a lot of what seems to bring you to that next level of being better at something and excelling or whatever it is, it's not, you would think it's grit and determination and raw willpower and never quitting and all of that, right? That's what the culture really embraces. And there's a place for that. Working hard is sometimes the thing you got to do, but more and more, it really seems like if you look at the people who do really well, it's not so much that. Like, yeah, they have a good work ethic, but for them, it mostly doesn't feel that way. They're not just gritting their teeth and white knuckling through it. It's more like it feels more natural to them. Or, yeah, they work hard, but it's fun. The kid who waited the longest to take the marshmallow, she wasn't the most determined. She was playing with her pretend horse. Just
right.
That was the secret. That was the answer to the marshmallow challenge, was feed your pretend horse. So to sum up this, like, the way to perform a full year above your fellow 5-year-olds and whatnot was to pretend to be Batman, which made the thing you're doing more fun. It just had more fun and they did better. And so often that seems to be the case, is where we're kind of just screwing ourselves by being in our own heads and doing something that feels like it shouldn't work, feels dumb, sometimes is the thing to do. Reading a mantra to yourself in the morning going, you can do it. It's gonna work. Like, yeah, that's stupid, but it works. And there's this saying where if it's stupid and it works, then it's not stupid. So I think that's my takeaway from that. And I haven't really had much time to try and apply this to me. But really excited to do that and start trying to look for, okay, let's try some genuine role play, like actually pretending to be someone else in the different things that I do, and just see how that goes, and just have fun with it. Like that just seems like a really fun way of trying to improve myself. And I can't wait to do more of that.
See you next week.
Okay. All right. See you next week.